Hi, I'm going to be speaking about enterprise learning and development systems for the 21st century. To begin with, I want to say that there is an organizational framework and a set of organizational principles that applies to a vast number of different organizational constructs. So for instance, it may apply to the individual, it may apply to a team, it may apply to a business unit, it may apply to a corporation, it may apply to a market, it may apply to a system. And this common organizational framework is basically a threefold scheme with the physical, vital, and mental being central to it. And the contention is that knowing which level drives an organization is going to determine how that organization operates and how it responds to different conditions in real time. Now, if we think about this, there is a very common example of this triple scheme that's very well represented in the way that a seed becomes a flower. And the three phases, if you will, the seed or the physical, the stalk or the vital, and the flower or the mental phase, represent this organizational paradigm and the principles that can enable or determine how any of these organizations act in real time. This being the case, the question is, what are the implications for enterprise learning and development? And so at the center of this organization and learning and development scheme, I would put a kernel that really is determined by the psychology of an individual, so the individual who's going to receive the learning and development experience. So depending on what drives the individual, or what combination, whether it's physical and vital, or physical and mental, or the mental leading, there is a specific and implicit aim for learning and development. So for example, if it's a physical, if a person is anchored in the physical, then the implicit aim for learning and development would be to move the individual up to at least a vital stage. If a person is anchored in the vital, the implicit aim is to move them up at least to the mental stage. If a person is at the mental stage, the implicit aim is to integrate the physical and vital into it. So there is a certain kernel that exists depending on the psychology of the receiver of the learning and development experience. Now, within the context of an enterprise, there's, based on this paradigm or this kernel, there may be a different set of guidelines that would be applied to the learning and development experience. So if a person is at the physical, then there's certain guiding principles that we would want to apply. If a person is at the vital, another set of guiding principles. If a person's at the mental, another set of guiding principles. Or if a person is at the transition between the physical and vital, there might be another set. If a person is at the vital but they use the mental a lot, there's another set of guiding principles. Or if a person uses the physical and the mental, there's yet another set. So if a person is squarely at the mental, then there's a set of guiding principles for how they would integrate the vital and the physical into it. Or if they're the mental but with a strong physical component, there's yet another set, and so on. So there's a number of different sets of guiding principles that need to be invoked depending on what the key psychology is of the person or the team that's receiving the learning and development experience. So superimposed on this in an enterprise context, the different departments that might exist. So you have, say, marketing or information technology or human resources or operations or materials management or finance as examples. And there's some content-specific material that exists for these different areas. So when we're creating a learning and development experience for an actor that might be situated at a certain psychology, then it becomes imperative that we have a dynamic interaction between, say, if there's specific content for marketing, and we know that the psychology of the individual team is at a certain level, then there needs to be a link with the right set of guiding principles, and that in turn needs to create a dynamic module that becomes real for the actor receiving the training. So what we have is, in real time, a number of different modules that might be created depending on the specific content and the specific psychology that drives the team or the individual. And this, in a nutshell, is a architecture for enterprise learning and development.